This is part 2 of my 2015 retrospective of my photography. If you haven't seen part 1, there's a link to it below. Please go and enjoy that. That covers the first half of the year. And we'll just keep up where that left off. In June, I flew out to Los Angeles and completed a large stretch of Route 66 that I had not driven before, which covered California, Arizona, and parts of New Mexico. The first place that I went was the pier in Santa Monica, which is the end of Route 66. Not only do they have a beautiful pier with a Ferris wheel and a nice end of route marker, but off to the side a bit on some of the walkways, they have this little marker signifying that Route 66 is also known as the Will Rogers Highway, which, being from Oklahoma, is a big deal for me. Will Rogers is our favorite son, and so it was really important for me to find this marker and get a picture, in addition to the ones that people more commonly associate with the Santa Monica Pier. So it's great, and it's one of those things that if you're just kind of a layman that has a passing interest in Route 66, you wouldn't even know this is over, off in the little park area just to the side of the main pier. So it means a lot to me in that sense too, that I knew enough when I went out to search for this. Whereas if I hadn't really done my research, I would have just gotten home and then later found out, oh, I missed this thing. This is a big bucket list item. This is an old sign for Roy's Motel and Cafe in Amboy, California, which is little more than a ghost town now. But it's on Old Route 66 in Eastern California. This sign is gigantic. Pictures don't really do it justice. It's in the middle of Amboy, which is really just a couple of buildings on this stretch of desert highway. And it was near the end of the day. I was afraid I wouldn't get here before I ran out of light. And thankfully, out west, the light lasts a little longer. And so I was able to get just a really great shot of this sign. I got a lot of shots, but this is probably my favorite, because you can see the old motel at the bottom. You can see the bricks at the bottom of the sign. You can see the mountains in the background. So it gives you some idea of scale, which even looking at it, it just doesn't do it justice. But man, it's beautiful, and it's one of the most iconic signs, not only on Route 66, but in the country. I've seen pictures of this almost my whole life, and to be standing underneath it and taking pictures of it was a surreal experience, and something that I really loved. On that same trip, I stopped at the Painted Desert, which is just off Route 66 in Arizona. And I didn't really have much in the way of expectation. I was like, oh, Painted Desert, that'll be really nice. I did not expect to find it just as beautiful and breathtaking as I did the Grand Canyon. I was absolutely floored with how just amazingly colorful the landscape was. You really can't beat the majesty of the Grand Canyon the first time you see it. Just your eyes can't process it. It feels like you're looking at a painting. And although this wasn't quite to that extreme, I found this just as beautiful with the colors and just the layers that you can see looking out to the horizon. It was amazing. This is a place I will definitely be returning to spend more time observing and just immersing myself in. If you're in the area, I highly recommend you pull off and just take a look. It's an excellent showcase of just the beauties of this earth. This is a small section of the To'Hajiilee Indian Reservation west of Albuquerque. This is a place I've been trying to get to for a while. I was a big fan of the television show Breaking Bad, and this area was used as a filming location for several pivotal scenes of the television show. It's out in the middle of an Indian reservation, unless you have like very specific directions or a waymark on like your GPS. It's very difficult to find. I even got turned around a few times trying to get out here, and I had specific directions. Very quiet, as long as you're respectful. The locals, are nice. They wave and everything. It's still, it's an Indian reservation, so you have Native American communities and schools and everything. With this being a filming location for an extremely popular television show, I imagine they've seen all shares of people coming out to take pictures and that kind of stuff. But it was nice. I had the place to myself, was able to walk around and just kind of enjoy the beauty of the location, while also being just kind of that giddy fanboy of the TV show, being like, oh, I'm in this place that I've seen on television. So that was cool. It's a very beautiful location. Now this was the entire reason I went out to California, Arizona, New Mexico to see that stretch of Route 66 when I did. They were doing a tour of several abandoned sites along Route 66 out by the Painted Desert, including what is generally considered to be the Holy Grail site of Route 66, over and above John's Bonner Cabins or any other place along the route. The Painted Desert Trading Post has just been sitting and slowly rotting in the desert since the 1950s on this abandoned stretch of 66, which now is on private property, which sits right next to the Petrified Forest and Painted Desert National Park. And they were doing an official tour of the area, so we had access to go back to this place that, unless you're trespassing, you don't get to see. And it was everything I hoped it would be. Beautiful New Mexico or Arizona skies. Just standing in this place that, since I had immersed myself in Route 66 culture, had been held up as the high watermark of locations for the road, was something else. I hope I get to see it again. But it's another place that, if I got an email tomorrow saying it has collapsed completely, I would not be surprised. It's part of the building foundation is gone. The desert does preserve things very nicely, but nothing lasts forever. And although I have a lot of shots of this building, this is one of my favorites because it also captures a stencil spray painted on the road by my friend Rich, known as Roman Rich in the Route 66 circles. He does a lot of traveling himself. So yeah, glad to finally add this to my list of visited locations. Now, it's tough to talk about this picture without getting into hyperbole. I don't know if I'm ever going to take a picture as beautiful as this one. So when I was in Arizona, I had the chance to meet with several Route 66 people, authors and other folks through the road. One of them was a man named Jim Hinckley from Kingman, Arizona, that has done a lot of traveling, written several books. And we had some good conversation, including about local landmarks around Winslow, Arizona, Winslow and Hallbrook. And this bridge came up. He had seen a little bit of my work and said, hey, you seem to like old bridges. There's this really great bridge out in Chevelon Canyon that I think you would really enjoy. So he gave me some basic instructions on how to get there. And so one of the afternoons I was out in that area, I took this dirt road through the middle of nowhere and suddenly came across this beautiful restored bridge that crosses this canyon. This was the first bridge the state of Arizona commissioned after becoming a state that crosses the Chevelon Canyon. It was restored in 2014, which explains why it looks so striking against the canyon landscape here. And just the day was so perfect. The clouds were great, the water was still, the greenery was out but not overwhelming. I had the whole place to myself for 45 minutes of taking pictures. This bridge served as a major point of crossing before Route 66 came into being. This was built in 1913 as part of the Transcontinental Highway system out west, and they put some money into it a couple of years ago to restore it because of its historical significance. But otherwise, it's just in the middle of nowhere, and I took a lot of pictures of it, and it was one of those moments where I was hopping around these rocks taking pictures, knowing, wow, this is really special, this is amazing, and I'm so glad that Jem told me about this bridge, because otherwise I would have been heartbroken to have missed it, and it now sits at the very top of pictures that I feel are best that I've taken. It's just breathtaking. I absolutely love this bridge. I love this place. I love this picture. I could talk about this for another half an hour, but I'm going to move on. The very last place I stayed on that trip out west was the Wigwam Hotel in San Bernardino, which the Wigwam hotels, although they're giant concrete teepees, not wigwams, have been around for ages and are one of the more iconic stops on Route 66 for travelers. There is a Wigwam motel in Fall River, Arizona, and this one in San Bernardino. It was great. I stayed one night before I flew out and went back home. But it's representative of kind of the kitsch culture that Route 66 is known for. I was very happy to be able to stay here, experience them myself. It was just great. San Bernardino has had its share of tragedy this year, and having been in that place for a period of time, really, you process things differently when you've been to these places, and then something happens, whether it's something historic or tragic or whatever. But if you're ever in San Bernardino and you think you might want to stay at the Wigwam, please do. It's great. The family that owns it is wonderful. The rooms are updated, and it's just great. You could say you've slept at the Wigwam, which is a talking point in and of its own. Also, first this year, a friend of mine here, local in Tulsa and Sand Springs, which is where the Page Memorial Library is, reached out and said they were putting together a Route 66 exhibit and they wanted to feature some of my photography. So, of course, I jumped at that opportunity, and for several months this year, I had some of my photography featured at this library, along with selections of work from other local photographers like Liz Huckleby and other historians and Route 66 notables, as Jim Ross and Shirley Graham out of Arcadia, and Michael and Suzanne Wallace, which Michael Wallace is known as one of the foremost historians on Route 66. This year I also had the distinct pleasure to finally meet him and his wife and have some conversation. It was just really great to see my work alongside things from these legendary folks from Route 66. There are others that are featured here it is just great. And so I took this picture when I went out to the library to see everything put together. I'm just so tremendously proud and honored to be in such esteemed company. Speaking of esteemed company, this year my immersion into Route 66 and Tulsa history put me in a place where I was able to give a tour to some traveling Route 66 folks that had decided to make a stop in Tulsa and see what we had to offer as a community. This is Willem Bohr. He and his wife Monique run one of the Route 66 groups that I post in on Facebook, and they're from the Netherlands. Route 66 appeals to a lot of international travelers, and to be able to take somebody that I had interacted with online, for the last year or so, and that ran a group that I held so dear, to be able to take them around my city and show them places that they hadn't seen before, even though they'd taken Route 66 before, obviously being so passionate about it. Willem actually makes small-scale models of a lot of the famous Route 66 stops that people know, and to be able to share new things with them and talk about some of the history of these places was just very humbling, and again, something I was very honored to do. And I've had the opportunity a few more times to take some people around Tulsa, and in fact, some of my friends joke now when we're out and about and someone says something about the Atlas Life building or the Cain's Ballroom or the Boston Avenue Methodist Church. I can rattle off a couple of small facts about it and everything, and I've started to be known as the Tulsa historian among my friend group, which is also an honor. This picture represents the last of the Indian capitals in Oklahoma that I visited. After seeing the Cherokee Nation capital, Tahlequah, I decided that I wanted 2015, if nothing else, to be the year that I went to visit all of the remaining capitals of what were known as the 5 civilized tribes in Oklahoma, which all the Seminole Capitol building no longer exists, but buildings are still there that represent the capitals for the Cherokee, for the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and the Creek Indians. that are in various places around the state. Some of them were used for courthouses and things like that over the years, but now all exist in historical capacity to represent the Native American culture specific to Oklahoma. I am 1/32nd Choctaw, and so this one was most important to me because it represented where a piece of my heritage came from. This is located in Pushmataha County, near the town of Tuskahoma, which really, I could have just included this just to say the town and county names because I love them so much. But this was a courthouse, still is an active courthouse, and a history center. I had some conversations with some folks in there. They have some really excellent grounds with historical markers for the Choctaw Nation. And I recommend it. If Native American culture is of interest to you, I would recommend doing the exact same thing. Just making some time to take some day trips to Tahlequah to see the Cherokee capital, to Tuskahoma to see the Choctaw capital, to Okmulgee to see the Creek capital, or to see the Chickasaw capital in Tishomingo. Just some really amazing places, and very important to not only the history of Oklahoma, but the history of the United States, and something that shouldn't be forgotten or glossed over. This is a historical marker up in Commerce, Oklahoma, which is up near Miami on the very northeast corner of Oklahoma where the Route 66 enters from Kansas. What's interesting about this is this marker is quite old. You can just the construction of it, let alone the rust on the old sign and everything. It's been here for a while. I haven't been able to find a specific date, but it's from the 50s or 60s, and it talks very positively about the mining industry in that part of the state. Talks about how much money has been raised from the mining of lead and zinc from the soil up in that part of the state. What this historical marker doesn't know is that since it was built, several towns have been completely evacuated and abandoned because of the toxic effects of that mining. This is very close to Pitcher, which is part of the Tar Creek Superfund site, which is nothing more than abandoned concrete pads and giant piles of gravel from the mining operations, where the drinking water was contaminated by lead poisoning, and the entire town is gone. There are several small communities up there that are essentially completely abandoned because of the mining operations that took place there, which when I discovered that this marker still existed, I went up to capture it because it's a time capsule to itself. You never know what the future holds or what we might be doing today that we look up at 10, 20 years from now and say, oh, hey, wait a minute, this is actually not a good idea. Very interesting, and something I'd driven past several times and had not noticed until someone told me about it. That same day, I stopped at what may be my favorite Route 66 stop on the entire route. This is the Hole in the Wall station in Commerce, which is half built in the side of this building behind it. I got a picture of my car there, which has been a faithful warrior for me up and down the road. Although this year I had to put a bit of money into it as a few things went wrong that I had to get repaired. Hard to believe that the car is 10 years old now, although I didn't get it until 2001 when my father passed. It's great to get in it and go for a trip and have it be my companion on these back roads throughout the state and beyond. And with this being a site that I enjoy so much, it was nice to be able to capture on a really beautiful day. This is something else that the wonders of social media made possible. They're currently restoring a selection of buildings on Route 66 here in Tulsa. A couple of old shops, they're going in and cleaning them up and making them for new retail space. And during one of those efforts, this old billboard was uncovered on the brick underneath the construction that had currently existed. This specific billboard was dated to the early 1940s, and obviously was at one point part of the exterior of a building instead of now it's an interior wall. And I was just so afraid that they were going to cover it up or destroy it, so I went down immediately and got a couple of shots of it. The people that are restoring it have since said no, they're going to keep it. They think it's historically important, which is fantastic. So happy to hear that. But at the time, I was afraid. Oh man, this is going to be gone. But what an amazing discovery! And it's in such great shape because it's been covered up for decades. So yeah, it was really cool. This is the restored sign for the Railhaven Motel in Springfield, Missouri. Samantha and I drove up to Springfield in August to participate and experience the birthplace of Route 66 Festival. We stayed at the Railhaven, which a lot of my Route 66 friends were also there. So it was an opportunity to not only introduce Samantha to Route 66 culture and the people that I had met and befriended over the past year, but gave me an opportunity to spend time in a town I hadn't spent a lot of time in many, many years. The sign is beautifully restored, although it was a bit hot, as it is in the Midwest in October or August. It was great. We got to sit out and listen to music from Route 66 band and listen to stories from people from all walks of life, all up and down the road and beyond. And it was just a really wonderful weekend to be able to go and hear the stories, as I so often like to do. This is Gary Turner's place, just outside of Springfield. And this shows kind of what's happened to the place since his passing in January. Although his family still owns it and keeps up with it, there have been a string of thefts of some of their old signs and other memorabilia, and so a lot of it's been put into storage now due to fears of more of it going missing. I get it, and it just sucks that people will do this kind of thing to a site that somebody has obviously poured a lot of love into. But to see it in its current state, just makes me extra sad. Not only is Gary gone, but people just, not everybody's a nice person and don't think about others when they decide to do things. But it's also a poignant picture to show that nothing lasts forever. And, I hope that this is one day restored to its glory as it was when Gary was still around. I know his family definitely wants it to be the place that it once was, but it's tough to do. It's tough to deal with that kind of thing. So. Chicago. So this year I did finally complete my Route 66 journey from end to end, although it was not all in one trip. I finally covered all of the miles. Well, it's almost impossible to cover all the miles, but I completed one of the alignments, at least, all the way from Chicago to LA. Chicago is an amazing city. I've been several times. I got to introduce Samantha to Chicago on this trip, and what I have pictured here is what is currently my favorite building in Chicago, the Wrigley Building on the left, and currently Samantha's favorite building, which is the Tribune Building on the right, with just that beautiful Gothic top that's been designed. The Tribune Building is known for having small pieces of other famous buildings embedded in it, and we spent quite a bit of time going around the bottom of the Tribune Building and observing pieces of other buildings around the world, and how they're incorporated into the building design. Chicago is just an amazing city, and I love being able to spend a little more time in it this year. As mentioned, this is the year that I completed Route 66, that makes it sound like it was this huge long ordeal that I'd been working years towards. It's hard to believe that my first Route 66 specific trip took place in 2013, which was just from Miami, Oklahoma to Tulsa. The next year I expanded a little bit into Missouri and out to Albuquerque. And 2015 I completed Illinois, Arizona, and California. This is in Odell, Illinois, just as the sun was setting, as you can see there on the left side of this restored Standard Oil station in Odell. What a trip, and what a year. This represents so much to me. And, that's not the end, of course. Your first trip down 66 For people like myself that are passionate about it, that's kind of where you get started, and you kind of see everything once and decide, okay, now where am I going to spend more time? Illinois was beautiful. Every state has its own identity on 66, and Illinois is no different. I just love this service station, and obviously what it represents to me personally and the Route 66 community as a whole. Downtown Tulsa again. This is the year that you can see here. There's this giant antenna array that's coming down on top of the old Southwestern Bell Dial building. For most of my life, I thought the thing was an eyesore and this terrible thing just kind of sitting on top of this great historic structure. But over the last year or so, it's really grown on me, and then, it gets taken down, which, you can just barely see behind the skeletal antenna array as it is in this picture, the fill tower behind there. It looks great. I mean, it's gone now. And it looks fantastic, but there was just a little bit of sadness that was going away, even though it itself wasn't historic. It had become a part of the skyline to the point where I missed it when it was gone. But sitting in the same chair next year, I'll probably think I'm completely ridiculous for missing it. I hate traffic. I don't like traffic jams. I spend a lot of time on back roads where there's just not very many other cars. And if I'm heading to Oklahoma City and I have to take I-44, not only does the traffic bother me, because people usually go faster than I want to be going and I stress out about it, but anytime there's a wreck or construction, things get backed up forever. One positive to this is sometimes while you're sitting on an expressway going 25 to 35 instead of 75, you see things that you miss otherwise, like this sign. This is outside Stroud, Oklahoma, just off I-44, and I looked over at one point and saw this rusted sign peeking out of the foliage, and lost my mind, because it references 66 as you're approaching Oklahoma City, and even though the sign itself is pretty simple, it represents something that is, I'm sure, gone now, although nobody's quite sure what motel this is referring to. I made a point about a couple of weeks later to drive down I-44 and specifically pull over to get a picture of this sign. And similar to the Lincoln County Express locomotive last year, this is something that a lot of my Route 66 friends hadn't seen before, and decided they wanted to go see themselves after I shared it on several of my social media outlets. In October, I got married to the love of my life. Samantha is amazing and wonderful and all kinds of things that I could go on and on about. We got married in Kane's Ballroom, which is a historic music venue here in Tulsa, which not only fit her vintage sensibilities, but also my leaning towards historic structures. After the wedding, which was amazing, and the next morning I went back with some of my friends to pick up some of our things we'd left, and a couple of rose petals were still on the dance floor, and you could see in the background a band is setting up for that night for a show. It's still an extremely active music venue. And so I snapped this picture on the way out of the building the day after the wedding. It represents a lot, it was such an amazing event to be surrounded by friends and family, both from here locally and from afar. And it was a great day, obviously. After the wedding, we went to Disney World in Florida for a honeymoon. I have hundreds and hundreds of pictures from that week, but I decided I'd share this one because this represents what was to come. Our first day there, we went to the Magic Kingdom, which I have a lot of memories from as a child. My family came down here several times as I was growing up, but I hadn't been in about 15 years. So to experience this place as an adult with nothing but nostalgic memories, I wondered if it would hold up to what I had built it up to be in my brain. I'm very happy to say that it absolutely did. It was just as magical as an adult as it was as a child, but for different reasons. And early in the day, as the gates were getting ready to open, this represents anticipation. This represents that feeling of just childhood glee that had already taken over both Samantha and myself as we began to experience all of the wonder that is Disney World. So, Giants of the Great Plains. This is in Granite, Oklahoma, which is in southeastern Oklahoma, or southwestern, sorry. And this is the first time that I had driven down to that part of the state with my camera to take some pictures. I'd heard about this giant granite mosaic and made it a focal point of the trip. This was built in 1979 and was actually phase one of a planned little tourist center that would also feature Sequoia, who created the Cherokee syllabary, or the Cherokee alphabet, I should say, and Jim Thorpe, who's an athlete from Oklahoma. They only did one, which is Will Rogers here. And a while later, fairly recently actually, a family in Wichita Falls, Texas donated a little tongue-in-cheek cemetery they had constructed that included a lot of Will Rogers quotes and things like that to kind of go with it, which surprised me. I didn't know it was there, and so when I walked up and started reading these gravestones next to this giant marker, I was aghast. I was like, what is this? Because it's a lot of comedic tombstones and stuff like that. But it's fantastic. This thing is like 30 feet by 28 feet. And it's just this gigantic stone mosaic just in this town of about 2,000 people. Definitely worth the trip. This is the Blue Dome here in Tulsa. I've included this picture because this is a perspective I never thought I'd be able to get of this building. I am currently standing on the roof of one of the side buildings next to the dome. The Tulsa Foundation for Architecture was able to host a tour of several buildings in the Blue Dome district of Tulsa, which included the dome itself. So not only did I get to see the dome from a new perspective, but I got to meet the current owners and talk to them about their work in restoring it and potentially making it more of a destination than it currently is. And I'm just very happy to have the opportunity. This is the same tour that I was able to see the inside of the warehouse that I mentioned at the very beginning of the series. And it represents kind of how far I came throughout the year, to seeing things from afar and taking pictures of them, to being more involved with people that are directly related to the buildings, and learning a lot more about the history as opposed to just, oh, that's really interesting over there, I'll keep going. This is the year I started to really ask questions and learn more about what I was seeing, which is showcased in this last picture, which is I had an art show in December and represents a culmination of my work so far. I was just so tremendously happy to have the opportunity to show my work at Dwelling Spaces, which is a shop in downtown Tulsa. The owner there, Mary Beth, has been very supportive of my work, and I was so incredibly pleased to be able to have this up throughout the month of December for people to walk by and see. I sold several pieces, not only in my opening night but throughout the month. But really, it was worth it just to have my work up and out and for people to look at, and I could share these things that I was so passionate about, and just represented the creative side of me, which I, for most of my life I didn't pay any attention to whatsoever. So it was really just an amazing experience to be able to do that and to have conversations with people and to just share what I love, which is also what I've been doing over the video. And I thank you all for sticking with me and listening to this. I hope I didn't bore the pants off of you, but I hope you learned something and saw some things that you liked, maybe some things you missed throughout the year as I posted throughout my various social media channels. I can't wait to see where the next year takes me. Going through all this at once really shows how much I've grown this year and the things that I've experienced. And I hope I have just as much to talk about at the end of 2016 as I did this year. Thanks.